Hi guys, let's have a look at preparing a business card design including bleed for print in Affinity Designer for the iPad. So this is fairly straightforward but can take a little time, so let's move right along. Now the ideas in today's tutorial we'll look at the process of designing a business card and highlight some important considerations when designing for print using the iPad. It's super important that you get things like bleed, colour mode and resolution right when you're creating your artwork. Otherwise you might end up having your files rejected by the printer, or having to start again from scratch, or even worse, receiving hundreds of prints back that look nothing like your design. Now remember, this is being done on the iPad, my favourite little work tool for Affinity. It's probably easier on the desktop, maybe not, but the same rules apply. But for those of us with an iPad, just follow along. Now considerations. Business cards are a common printed product that are fairly simple to design. But before you start, make sure you receive specific artwork instructions from the print house you're going to use. Every company has their own preferences, so the settings used in this tutorial might not match up exactly with what your printer wants. But at least you'll know what they're referring to when they say stuff like trim size and bleed size. Now, US sizes are slightly different to European UK sizes. Business cards are slightly different in size, not much, so it'll be easy to adjust if you're using US sizes. You really do want to be able to go to your printing house and say, here's my business cards design, they're all laid out, all you have to do is print the document. Now let's create a master. Use the business card preset, that's very easy, it's already built into Affinity Designer. Now we're designing for print, so select the CMYK colour mode. So we're working in cyan, magenta, yellow and black inks as opposed to RGB light. Remember this because you eventually need another card just like it for the other side of the card. This is a two-sided card, remember? Now let's set some details. With your new document created, select the document tool and from the drop down select bleed. In the context toolbar, set the bleed size to 3mm on all sides. You'll see a red border appear around your created document, 3mm outside of the design size. So in effect it makes the card stock you'll use just a little bit bigger than the preset card size, but that's what we want and there's a reason for this. Bleed is basically some padding around the edge of the design which is cut off during the printing process. It ensures that you don't end up with teeny slithers of white paper along the edge of your print if the machine isn't lined up exactly, and that can happen. Now in more detail, with your bleed created, we need to understand how you can actually see the bleed area outside the trim area. Remember, the trim is the exact size of the card. It's the finished cut size of your document once it's been trimmed. In other words, 88mm by 55mm in this case. The bleed allows you to draw graphics or colours right outside the visible so it can be trimmed off and not leave visible borders around your document. That's the very worst thing you want. Looks very amateurish. You don't want those visible borders. So in more detail, let's look at this again. With your bleed created, drag out a coloured rectangle the full size of the bleed area. That's right out to those blue dots surrounding the yellow card of the trim area. So you've got your 88 by 55 plus bleed is 88 plus 6 by 55 plus 6, or 94 by 61. Initially, on the iPad, you will not see the yellow rectangle in the bleed area, And you think, how can I work with this if I can't see where the bleed area ends? We can fix that. Select the document tool, that's the three dots at the top inside the little box. Then canvas, then clip to canvas. This will reveal the entire canvas. Let me show you. There it is. You can see the yellow document right out to the bleed edge. Now what I've done here is just to keep the whole thing visible. Your full-size document will now show out to the bleed. The original document outline can be seen below the yellow. It'll show up as a faint coloured line. But we need something more definite just for the moment. Place another rectangle. White is good, and why not? This is the actual size of the card, 88 by 55 millimeters. Now you can clearly see your bleed. That's the part that will be trimmed off, leaving a nice clean edge. Graphics and text are not to enter that bleed area. Now, one of the problems with the iPad, when you move off this or save it and come back tomorrow, that bleed area canvas attachment will be gone. So you just have to do it again. Go back to document and reapply the bleed. You need the bleed, especially when applying graphics, even just plain coloured backgrounds. There's nothing worse than seeing horrible plain paper slivers showing around the borders because they weren't trimmed cleanly. You don't want 1,000 cards like that one delivered. It's also wise to highlight a safe area within your document. This not only makes sure your important elements like a name or logo aren't too close to the trim areas that they risk being chopped off. It also helps balance your design by applying some margin around the edge. You don't want your document right up to the edge. The size of the safe zone is entirely up to you, but 5mm shifts your elements inwards enough to look neat, and it's kind of a standard. 3mm bleed, 5mm margins. So to add those, open Documents, Add Guides and place guides at 5mm in on all sides. This is your safe area. That's 5mm in from the edge of the trim size, not the bleed. That's actually 8. So your margins are, for the total document, 8mm in. That makes sense, I'm sure. Now, blacks just ain't black, Sol. I want a black background for my card design. So I'll tap the Move tool and select the shape that covers the entire bleed area. A black background, that's a tongue twister. Sounds simple enough, but there's a whole plethora of different black colours that can be printed. If you move the colour picker to black in the colour picker interface, you'll notice it's made up of 000 in the RGB slider scale, which means there's no light, so it's as dark as you can get. But then switch it to the CMYK values, the CMYK sliders, and they're all over the place. That's quite different. Even your black is not truly black. It's 88% just there. There's the option of a basic 100% K black, which uses just the black ink from the standard CMYK process colours. This is a good choice for text because just using one ink out of the 4 CMYK colours means you'll get the sharpest possible print. But when it's applied to a large area, like a business card, it can look a little washed out. Notice I still have the white overlay rectangle in place here, but I also have a rectangle under that that's all black. That's the one we're talking about. Now, rich black is the term used for mixes of cyan, magenta, yellow and black that result in a deeper black print. Now, a standard combination is 50, 40, 40, 100, which refers to the percentages of the 4 CMYK colours you set in your software and the amount of ink printed with each colour. The trouble is this particular colour mix uses all 4 colours, so it has a high risk of causing fuzzy text as the artwork is printed 4 times one on top of the other. This becomes particularly prominent if any of the print heads or plates are misaligned, known as misregistration in print terms, and this does happen, so be aware of it. Now, a couple more common black options are warm black and cool black, which mix 100% K with 50% cyan or magenta. These 2 recipes only use 2 colours, so it's much safer to use with detailed artwork while still darkening the black print. The difference between them, as their names suggest, is one has a more of a cooler blue tone, whereas the other has a warmer browny red tone. I'm going to use blue elsewhere in my design, so I'll go with cool black to complement it. Set up the colour manually by entering the relevant percentages in the CMYK values sliders, and you can see I've got that there, KN 50 and black, which is the K, 100%. So here I have the white rectangle, the actual card size, turned off, but you can still see the outline there. That's the actual document outline, so it still shows through. You can also see the bleed, the guides for the safe zone, and the overall cool black all set. The black is controlled by the CMYK and is understood by the commercial printing houses. You can now begin building your business card design by bringing in a logo. Scale it to size and align it to the safe zone guides. There's no white ink in printing unless it's a super specialist print, so giving something a white fill in your software will translate to the other elements being knocked out to allow the white paper stock to show through. Copy and paste your SVG logo, then select both layers. You can see I've got there, the white layer is still turned off, the top rectangle. Now I've got a small curve element on top there and the black rectangle underneath it. Both of those selected. I will change this logo as we go along, so it's just there for example at the moment. Now we need to cut that logo out so the white paper of the cardstock shows through. So with both layers selected, go to the Edit tools and select Subtract from the geometry list. If you can't see the geometry list, it's because you don't have both layers selected. That's the result of the geometry exercise. The logo is cut out cleanly, exposing the white cardstock. You can see in the Layers panel that I have unselected the white rectangle. We actually don't need it now, so it can be even deleted if you like. Now, I was not happy with the logo image I used, so I've changed it to better emphasise the result of subtracting the logo and title text from the background. The result is still only a 1-colour print, saving you a lot of money. So if you were to just print that, that's purely black on white cardstock. Don't be disturbed by the purple halo you can see there. That's just the Affinity Designer program that puts that in there. It goes away. The result so far. Now see, that's exported as a PDF and you can see there's no purple halo there anymore. The image is well within the safe area and it's only 1 colour, black. Now to add a little more information. When entering the text for your print design, 6 point is usually the lowest you'll want to go. That's pretty small. A business card is held up close so you can get away with generally smaller type. But be careful if you're using elegant fonts with high contrast. There's a point where fine lines become unprintable and thus unreadable. The Syncopate font I'm using is pretty robust, so it can handle 6 point as shown here. Now you can see that Tracy Dunbar word there, that's in 6 point. and it's the Syncopate font, generally available out there. In my design, I'm enclosing the main name and contact info in a white box, which needs extending up to the bleed area. Remember, we don't want any borders. One thing to keep in mind when designing for print is the paper stock forms a large part of the final design, which you don't get to see on screen. A lot of people try to add gradients and drop shadows to make their designs more interesting, but these often just muddy the final print. An area of flat colour might look boring on screen, but when it's printed, you'll see the texture of the paper with a matte or glossy finish. And you can see there, what are we printing with? We've still got one colour, black and white. Well, white's the cardstock and black is the only colour that is being printed. But remember what I said about printing with black. You've got a black background and you've got black text. So the black text will be 100k%, pure black. The original shows all of the design, but the export you just saw doesn't show all of that. It disappears. Cool, huh? All of that purple stuff, gone. The text within this area needs to be black. I could keep using cool black with 50% cayenne, but there's not really any point, seeing as the text isn't a large enough area to see the difference. Adding cayenne or cyan, depending on which school you went to, just increases the risk of a misregistration problem, which would result in a light blue haze around the text. On balance, using the normal 100k option is the better choice. Now, we're going to the other side of the card because we're moving right along now. For the other side of the business card design, I'm going to make the background white, but make use of a photo. And this photo is available from the stock studio on the right-hand side, so it's nothing fancy in this case. We need to recreate the business card document. So make a new card document and set the bleed to 3mm all around. Just as before, the maths are the same. Clip to canvas is applied so the white background of the rectangle goes out to the bleed. The cardstock is white anyway, but I want to demonstrate the importance of bleed. All print needs to be 300 dpi to ensure the raster image is detailed enough to print clearly. So make sure the resolution is 300 pixels per inch, ppi, then make sure the colour mode is CMYK. That's easy enough to do, and you should be familiar with that by now. We can see where the actual trim line is, but setting the safe zone up using guides again will make sure the elements are laid out neatly, exactly as before. 3mm bleed plus 5mm margins means the guides need to be placed 8mm in from the document edges. Simple. Who was it in school said you don't need math? Ha! Well, it can be all throughout, and here we go. I want to have the logo and a tagline on this side of the card, so I'll paste in the logo graphic that I used before and type out the text with the relevant font. It's the same font, just a little bit larger. Don't go mixing fonts all over your card. It makes it unreadable and it looks amateurish. Usually it's advised to add all your text because it's made in crisp vectors rather than fuzzy pixels when you convert the text to curves. That's important because your printer may not have the fonts you use, so convert all texts to curves. You can see there I've got Synergy Systems and they're all curves. It's been converted to curves. You know how to do that, I'm sure, in the Edit Studio up the top there with everything highlighted and convert to curves. Now you've got to sort of take 2 steps back here. You convert to curves, but because we want to do something with this, you're going to have to merge those curves. Now I want to put an image behind the logo and text. So you need to select all of the text curves and all of the logo curves together, So if your logo has many curves and your text has many curves, as you can see on the far right there, select all of those. No good just selecting the group name. You've got to select all the curves and merge them into one curve. Now you can drag your image into the curve to mask it. You select all those layers, all those curves, and go to the toolbar, select Merge Curves. Too easy. And you can see there that they all become one curve. The layer is at the top, the merged curves are the next layer, and then I've placed an image of space, if you like, stars and all of that kind of thing, just drawing it in from the studio, placed it in the layer, right at the top above the first layer you can see there, and then drag it halfway into that merged curves layer, and it drops down to there and is hidden by the layers. But let's have a closer look. That's the image dragged into the logo mask. Okay, let's see this again. Depending on your complexity of your logo and text, the task of selecting all the curves can be a fiddle, but you will eventually get it. Let me show you in this example. There's art text, which is unconverted at the top, says syncopate, unconverted, the logo curves and the background, which we don't need to worry about. The art text is converted to curves and all selected along with all logo curves. So you can see the text and the logo there. You can see their shapes, and they're all grey because they're selected. And merged using the editor and merge curves tool. And there we are, merged into one layer called curves. You can name these layers, makes them easier to find later. Now we can use that to mask the star background. So let's place the star background fill. Place a space image from the stock studio. We can use this with the mask. You can see how it's a new layer of its own now, just above the curves where the mask is. And you can actually see the mask of the logo and syncopate just behind it. There we go. Simply drag the image until the blue bar is halfway inside the logo and release it. There's your mask. Ignore the purple again, it disappears. It's a bit of a nuisance, but there you go. And that's what it looks like. The space image patterns can be clearly seen on export, so I exported it, and behind syncopate and behind the rocket ship you can see the space image, or elements of it. So in fact you could have anything behind there. Well, nearly finished. We now have both sides done. Side 1, very simple. Side 2, with a coloured logo on it. Synergy Systems. Side 1 and Side 2. Now, exporting. Sometimes a printer will ask for trim or crop marks, while others prefer to receive the basic art file to process themselves. You will need to ask your printer, but however, Affinity has both options. To show all printer marks and bleeds, select as shown. Just turn them on in the export toolbar. Or leave them off if the printer doesn't need them. Leave them off if the printer does want them, turn them on. All printer marks and bleed selections are shown in that one. Direct export, no marks shown. You can see they're turned off. Those two options are turned off. And the result? Nice clean print. One colour, black, very cheap. And of course, side 2 is treated similarly, except that it's got a bit of colour in it. Now, remember when your printer comes back and says, but you've got two colours here. Yes, you have. On the back, you've got the colour that's behind the rocket ship, or the shuttle, I guess. That is definitely the old space shuttle. So that's enough for today. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you get some value out of designing business cards on the iPad. And why on the iPad? Because you can be sitting in front of your client and knock this up at their desk. You don't have to be in your office, on the move. There you are. Take your office with you. Love the iPad mini. The result of exporting, side 1 and side 2. So when it goes to your printer, that's what it'll look like. Well, this one. Yours, of course, will be different. So thanks for watching. I hope you find it useful. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click on the thumbs up for a like and the bell to be reminded when new videos appear. I really appreciate it.